What does fate have in store for the Palestinian people? In a survey I conducted on the Palestinian question on my YouTube channel's community page, 58% voted that the Palestinian people would gain some type of iteration of a nation as an eventual outcome. Whether it would be in the form of a single state, two-state, or other solution wasn't really identified. I agreed with the findings of this survey, that there will be a manifestation of Palestinians' ability to self-rule. And this outcome, I believe, will be a consequence of another imminent landmark moment that is just now starting to accelerate towards its becoming a reality. A moment that had begun many decades ago, a moment even before the establishment of the State of Israel. A moment that will arrive at its summit within the foreseeable future. Many scholars in the past mainly attributed the fall of empires and nations to the element of moral decay. The ancient Egyptian civilization and Roman Empire were explained as powers that were characterized with severe corruption and grievous immorality, causes that brought about their demise. More recently, historians have gone back and challenged the idea that the fall of empires was strictly due to moral decay. I both agree and disagree. Yes, as per modern historians, there were many other significant parallel causes that led to the downfall of power centers in history. But where I disagree with them is that I still believe that immorality was, is, and will be a major factor in the crashing and burning of many powers, past, present, and future. And this moral decay is plain and simple. It is the lack of understanding or grasp by those in power and those who support them of what is right and what is wrong. One would think this task simple, no? Right versus wrong. But in Israel's case, it isn't so simple. In the Zionist iteration of the State of Israel, one can look at the current leadership and be convinced that the leadership is the sole source of moral decay. But such a perspective, though, is both limited and naive. The leadership is representative of a substantial cross-section of Israeli society, and therefore the decay, first and foremost, drills down all the way to groups and then individuals who represent the constituencies of the Netanyahus, Ben-Gvirs, the Smotriches, and others. It's not only these leaders who don't have the fundamental humane belief and conviction of what differentiates right from wrong. No, it's the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Zionist Israelis that believe that what they're actually doing is on the right side of humanity, while billions of people around the world observe their actions and statements, yet who are convinced otherwise. And it's this self-isolated, entitled realm of immorality license that Zionists operate in. A sense that other humans are below them. And it's not only Palestinians they have a superiority complex towards. No, they hold higher existence towards the rest of the world. In many cases, this phenomenon even applies towards their own citizens. Towards the Arab Israelis who are considered second-class citizens. Towards both secular and non-secular Jews whose standing is on higher moral ground, yet are judged as self-hating because they don't stand for the same injustices as do Zionists. A condition of moral decay is fracturing Israeli society. A major chasm is appearing where on one end stand secularist and ethical Jews, and on the other side, a zealous form of Zionist far-right nationalists. And when assessing history, it's clear that a confrontation is coming, arriving at a boiling point, thereby shaking the foundations of the purported myth of a one and chosen people. And all this is based on the fact that the fundamental reality of right and wrong is different amongst the several subgroups that make up Israeli society. One contingent, let's call them the extremists, believe that what has been done in the past and the present in terms of dehumanizing Palestinians is not only acceptable practice, but a necessary one. The killing of women and children is justified, no matter the reasons or consequences. The counter-contingent, let's call them the moderates, consider the conduct of the leadership and its supporters as genocidal and contrary to both international law as well as that of Judaic principles, ethics, and morality. Yet these moderates generally remain silent at the moment, with a few here and there raising their voices to protest such unacceptable and immoral behavior. And of course, when it comes to the lives of Israelis themselves, the many hostages, both young and old, who remain within the grasps of Hamas, these moderates raise their voices even louder, Again, heard, but met only with silence and the continuation of the Israel occupation forces' violence that could eventually result in the killing of their own. What is clear is that a shift has come onto the Zionist mindset, and this new reality prioritizes achieving geopolitical goals through the enacting of violence and the taking of innocent life over that of achieving a ceasefire and, as a consequence, returning the hostages to their families. In the past, one Israeli Jew's life was worth much more. Now, not so much, in light of new agendas and priorities. One point to note is that the extremist element of Israeli society doesn't seem to care too much about the hostages. The majority of hostages held are from the moderate section of society, and hence, their importance and value, as mentioned earlier, is maybe secondary to the mowing of the lawn at Gaza. If we move geographically north, away from Gaza and into the West Bank, we see more iterations of moral decay. Not in the sense that settlers are taking more and more of Palestinian lands and territory, but with the impunity of these immoral acts when conducted. Theft is one thing, but the terror and killings that come hand in hand with settler behavior are reflective again of a twisted concept of right and wrong. What makes it even more shocking is that the settlers, in theory, are ultra-Orthodox Jews, supposedly humans who should emanate a high level of Judaism. But again, this attitude only proves that hyper-religiousness doesn't necessarily equate to being morally sound, and also that one extremist man's right does equal another moral man's wrong. And the theft doesn't stop there. It's not only about lands allocated to Palestinians. New land grabs across Greater Israel's borders have started. Syrian lands are the first of such international border crossings. This strategy is only now starting, and I have a full video discussing the topic of how Zionists look to broaden their concept of Greater Israel. I've added a link to the video above. The claims that Israel operates detention camps is known to all. The fact that torture, rape, and murder take place is also one that is surely coming to the surface and day by day is being proven beyond doubt. There is no denying that acts contrary to all international laws, UN charters, Geneva Conventions, and so on, are taking place and have done so for years, if not for many decades. This is moral decay for sure. But what is more troubling for Israeli society is the fact that when those who commit such inhumane and cowardly acts are treated as heroes by the extremist majority of Israeli society.
The soldiers in this country are a consensus. If they touch our soldiers, we'll build a shield wall. The people will rise up against the government, be it left or right or whatever. Nobody can touch our soldiers.
When those accused of rape and murder are illegally freed by Israeli civilians without the intervention of the police or military. When the right-wing media parades the rapists and killers live as ones who honored the Zionist cause.
רק חבל שלא עושים את זה בצורה ממוסדת כחלק מתקנון התעללות בעצירים, כי אז החבר'ה הבאים שיחשבו לעשות לנו 7 באוקטובר יגידו, אתם רואים מה עושים להם בישראל? אל תחשבו על זה בכלל.
What happens next to Israeli society when it's no longer a question of Israeli versus Palestinian? When it becomes a question of Israeli Jew versus Israeli Arab, or Israeli right-wing Jew versus Israeli moderate Jew? When does the supremacy line stop being drawn? After all, once morally decayed and not knowing right from wrong, who will be able to selectively cease and desist? Going back to the concept of the fall of empires due to moral decay or corruption, the Zionist state seems well on its way. The main elements and their seeds have been planted. The duality of morality is dominant in Israeli society. On top of this, there is an oncoming shift in governance and tensions that is now questioning the role of democracy within the State of Israel versus the State of Zionism, and potentially in the reduction in the role of its democratic institutions, namely the checks and balances along with the justice system. Again, the same polarities within the Israeli state are at odds on this issue, and based on the trend and momentum taking place today, what will happen has only 2 paths. The first path is when Israel adopts a new legislation and becomes more authoritarian and extremist in its existence. Justified by what? Again, the ever-present existential crisis. And this will represent a moral decay more widespread than ever before. thus causing a great exodus of the moderates, and I mean literally emigration, thereby leaving Israel even more extremist. The second path will mean a new instability and possible implosion of society, when extremists and moderates totally fail in communication, blinded by their alternative versions of moral reality. The fabric of society will start to crumble, initially through political and economic uncertainty, followed by internal conflict and violence. And in either scenario, unless a new third path arises due to a new awareness and humanity by the collective Israeli society, will mean that Zionist Israel as we know it will fail. What its fate might be, we don't know, but for sure, it will become a shadow of its former self, and by default, will grant Palestinians an opportunity to achieve their goal of statehood. Moral decay of Zionism isn't new. It's not about the dynamics of today. It's older than the state of Israel. It goes back to how Zionists manipulated nations and convinced them, hook, line, and sinker, of their disingenuous narrative and forced their hands by any means necessary. And ever since, this immorality has persisted and grown. The fact that the world wasn't aware of it due to nations, especially Western global powers, who condoned the acts of Zionists and Israeli governments, is a thing of the past. Now, in the 21st century, what happens globally, for all to hear and see. No longer is it masked by the biased media or justified by the guilty regimes. And what is now revealed is that the moral compass of the extremists in Israel, the Zionists, is shockingly inhumane and is slowly being looked upon negatively by the collective morality of the world. And with that will come greater division amongst the people of Israel, a people who always claimed a secular nation ruled by freedom and justice, yet who solely justify their existence through biblical rationalizations. A true hypocrisy. And this hypocrisy now is reflected with their extremism and misunderstanding of the universality of right and wrong. And with this hypocrisy also comes denial, that they're never in the wrong and have never been. And with this perverted belief, let me remind all of the cycles of history. Just as the Zionists used the Jewish past to justify their claims to the lands of Canaan, allow me to use the same religious history and remind all when the Israelites ruled the lands, when the people of the kingdom of Judea spurned God's principles of moral living, and then their immorality was then cursed by God, who expelled them out of the lands. I see a similar self-inflicted trend developing.